Excellent. There we go. Okay, so welcome to today's Arborist call on the 12th of December. The agenda is, we've got a packed agenda today. So first of all, we'll check in on NU6 activation status with all of the relevant teams. Then we'll follow that with some updates from the ECC and the Foundation's core development teams. We will then take some time to discuss Zcash deprecation, research and implementation updates on those listed projects, and finally a discussion on NU7. And then if we have time after that, we can move on to any other announcements or discussions. So what is the Arborist call? It is a bi-weekly call where Zcash protocol contributors meet up to discuss upgrade timelines and process, protocol research and development efforts, design and implementation of new protocol features, and we identify blockers and unresolved issues. And the purpose of this call is to try to make Zcash protocol development accessible to interested parties and provide some transparency for everyone. Anyone can register to attend. You can go to zcasharborist.org and you will get links to register. If you want to become more involved and present, you can email us at arboristcall@cfnd.org. To request a presentation slot, and we will add you to the agenda. Outside of the Arborist call, you can participate in the Zcash community in a number of ways, such as by applying to one of the grant programs, and you can take part in community discussions on the Zcash R&D Discord or the Zcash Community Forum. And there are clickable links for all of these at zcasharborist.org. So we have a full agenda today, so I would ask that we all try to keep the updates brief, try to not stay too much into other discussions yet. There'll be probably time later on in the agenda to delve deeper into some items. So with that said, if we can have a brief status update on NU6, maybe I'll start that off saying that from the Zebra side, we believe we are done. We had one issue that is now fixed, whereby there was some strange behavior when there were transactions that contained the NU5 consensus branch ID. And there may be a tiny follow-up fix to that, but we're pretty much done. I don't know if anyone else has any more updates, maybe on the Zcash D side or on the NU6 wallet support. I'll open it up.
As far as I know, there are no problems on the Zcash D side.
Great. Thank you, Darima. Go ahead, Paku.
Okay, yes, we continue to receive or to read online, like people are complaining about Trust Wallet and Exodus Wallet. We are in contact with those two wallet developers, and like we're apparently their fixes are on their way. I don't know the details on how they do releases, so these releases might be like staged or progressive, and incrementally going to like the whole user base for in case of like mobile, if they do stage releases. And like I pinged them this morning and yesterday to see, to have more precisions on when update, to keep it short. And then in terms of Ledger, the Zondax is collaborating with Ledger engineers in terms of the Zcash transparent application that is the Ledger Live application that is having problems, many problems, but specifically with NU6, some new problems that it didn't used to have before. And we have confirmed it's a problem on their side. There's nothing wrong with the update itself. It's just that they haven't updated, and they had tech debt that impacted them, like even in ways that they wouldn't think it would impact them. So they're working on it. I also pinged them to see if they needed any further assistance. I don't know, anything they needed, if they had an update. So I'm waiting for their response. They did push or posted some update for users. And if you had seen that troubleshooting tutorial on the Ledger side, it has the wrong seg wallet link. You should go to the Sondex X account or ping us on the forums, and we'll like send you the correct links to and websites where the tutorials are to use the Zcash Shielded Ledger app if you might, because Ledger posted the wrong link there.
Have we contacted Ledger
yeah.
to get that link fixed?
Yes, we did, and I pinged them again so that they fix it. They haven't.
Okay.
Yes.
Eek.
So yeah. So basically, and that's it, I think, on the wallet side.
Okay, thank you, Paku. Anyone else on NU6? I don't think so, but yeah, let's move quickly on. ECC updates on Zcash delete Sashi and the wallet testing case. Who wants to tell us something about that?
Well, no updates on Zcash D. It's nice that we are not spending any time on Zcash D, and that's absolutely great. For Zashi and the wallet SDKs, we are heads down doing lots of work for the Keystone integration, and that is sort of the highest priority, sort of overriding everything else, as we're wanting, if we can, to get that released by Christmas, and we're not sure yet whether that will happen. It depends to a large extent on the Keystone firmware changes, and whether there are any bugs on their side. I mean, we know there are bugs on their side, so it's just how long it's going to take to get that fixed.
Great. Thank you very much.
We are able to test our code because there's a simulator, and so we can, to simulate the communication between the simulated Keystone and the wallet app. We're intending to have a debugging feature where you can just export the data as a file, and that will make it a lot easier to test. Chris and Strad, have I missed anything?
So the main relevant piece here tying into this is that the PCZT format for V1 of the PCZT format is done. There'll be an upcoming the first release of the PCZT crate that will that supports that. It does so basically it can only I have not tested it with the V4 transactions. It might work. Have not the implementation that we have can't do V4 signatures because that wasn't necessary on the timeline. So essentially, if you want to build V5 transactions as a PCZT, you will be able to do so. So that will, in particular, only support the V5, essentially, as I said, the V5 format, TX format, and it at the moment, I believe, also only supports the implementation, only supports P2PKH spends in for the roles that are currently defined. If you wanted to find your other roles yourself, other than that, you're welcome to. The format obviously enables it because we've built in the same functionality as PSBTs have from BIP 174 for transparent signing. The main other bits that it doesn't support is it doesn't have any fields for Frost, because we didn't have time to pin down what those would be. And it doesn't have any speculative support for ZSAs. It is entirely, because we don't know what the V6 transaction format is fully going to look like yet. That's still to be written up. And so what we are instead planning is that the V1 PCZT format can be used and essentially tested in production. We can confirm it's satisfying the main use cases because it will work, and then people can experiment with what other things they would they are unable to do with that beyond simply it doesn't support the ZSA pieces. And then in parallel with defining the V6 transaction format, we'll define we will be able to define a V2 PCZT format that has support for ZSAs, and therefore being able to do incremental construction of shielded assets in addition to ZEC transactions. And that would also be the ideal time to bring in Frost support as well. So that would be, because at this point we have the implementation of everything, so it would be good to augment it with Frost in testing capacity to figure out mainly the interaction patterns and what's necessary to include and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's basically there. We have tooling related to that, but I think that's everything for this particular topic.
Great. Paco, you want to say something? And then
Diana. I've been looking at the PCZT API. It looks really nice. Are you folks planning to like expand like how to use it, documentation, or like do some README on how to like quickly get a grasp on like how to integrate PCZTs?
The intention of that is the PCZT crate itself, which has a bunch of internal documentation, but I have rendered the Rust documentation for it, and it's currently not great. If I have time before the 0.1 cut of it, depending on, because that might be tomorrow, it might be Monday, we'll see when that happens. If I have time, I will try and get something in, but it is my intention to put documentation in there, yes. That being said, the crates, the roles and things themselves are also relatively straightforward in terms of how the integrations work. Like they use the type system to constrain how they get used. And also, the thing I forgot to mention is that the way that we're integrating into Zashi is via the Zcash client backend crate. So if you're familiar with the create proposed transactions API that's currently there are two new APIs that essentially are either half of that. One, create PCZT from proposal, and the other one, extract and store transaction from PCZT. So that's the interface to swap in from, if you're using that backend, swap in from your current monolithic function that does proofs and signatures and everything internally, taking a USK, to instead take the proposal, generate the PCZT, then you use the proving and signing roles that are in the PCZT crate, and then you pass the PCZTs back into that second method. So that's the expected way that most people interact with. So actually, probably most people will be interacting via the mobile SDKs because that's being exposed by that aspect as well. But for anyone who's like wanting to build their own offline signers or stuff like that, that you'd be dealing with the either the PCZT crate or just implementing the format yourself.
Nice. All the versions, like you need to be in the latest versions of all the crates to use PCZTs, right? Like
if you want
13.
if you want to do anything that involves the protocol specific types, then yes. However, I explicitly built the PCZT crate so that by default it has no dependency on any of the rest of the Rust crates.
Okay.
Zcash Rust. So if you are just using it for parsing the format, combining, doing anything that doesn't require understanding a particular protocol, like just introspecting the raw data, you can just use the PCZT crate directly, and doesn't matter what version of the regular Zcash Rust dependencies are on. The only hard dependencies of the crate are postcard, because that's what we use for the V1 encoding, and Serde to get to that encoding. Everything else is optional.
But obviously, if you need to sign, then that requires more dependencies.
Yeah, but it would, in theory, be possible for you to do the parsing there and then essentially backport to an earlier version if you really wanted to. You could do that. It would not be fun, but you could do that.
Yeah, Yeah.
If you can get to the latest crates, then you get to use all the stuff that we wrote to do that parsing and signing and things.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we can keep the other questions on Discord. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that you mentioned V2 of PCTs supporting V6 transactions. We might want to synchronize the versions so it's actually V6. Any given version of PCT supports that version of transactions and potentially.
I don't think that's worth doing personally, because there are likely to be like V2. If we weren't doing V6 transactions, we would do a V2 to add frost.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. We could, yeah, we could have it be transaction version dot and then a subversion. Yeah, maybe it's not worth it. All right.
We can discuss that offline.
Just a throwaway idea. Carry on.
Great. Anything else on the ECC side, or should we move on to Zebra? Okay, let's move on to Zebra. Marek, I think, is giving the update today.
Yeah, so the main thing for today's update is the release of 2.10. We upgraded the minimum protocol version so that Zebra now won't talk to outdated peers even during its initial sync. We added the get block header RPC, and we updated the get block RPC using the get block header one. We had one bug in the transaction verifier that showed up during NU6 activation. Basically, we weren't properly checking the consensus branch ID field in V5 transactions, and transactions with this field set to the consensus branch ID corresponding to NU5 would make it into Zebra's mempool even during NU6 was active. We noticed this bug and fixed it. Han noticed it as well. Thanks for that. And we had this check in the block verifier though, but block verification happens or rather doesn't apply to mempool verification.
So what's the practical consequence of this? Is there any denial of service issue that an adversary using these invalid transactions could cause, or?
Yeah, it could be a denial of service if a mining pool basically was using Zebra as a backend, then this transaction would make it into a block template, and then Zebra, if a miner mined such a block, then Zebra would refuse it, and that would be a DOS for the miner, basically.
So does Zebra recheck the block, or rather, when does Zebra recheck the block in that case? Does it it attempts to mine the incorrect block? Is that right? So it doesn't run the block verifier on the block that it's creating.
Yeah. We want to make sure that the get block template RPC behaves so that when a mining pool requests a block template, Zebra applies the same checks as when it receives the block back as a proposal. And we currently don't do that. So
but you're already doing the block checks when you receive it back as a proposal, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so the denial of service is only on the mining pool, it's not on the rest of the network.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yes, but even it's still bad for the mining pool because they would waste a lot of work. So and then if all mining pools were using Zebra, that would be a problem for the whole network then.
Yeah.
So we want
because
to make sure.
Yeah, because the adversary would have an advantage in rollback attacks because the rest of the network hash rate or some large proportion of the network hash rate would be useless.
Yes. Yeah. So we to get rid of this, we want to make sure that Zebra won't create blocks that would contain data that would be later refused after filling the solution for the block. And then the way we want to do this is to apply the same checks, and then if there's anything wrong, we would just exclude the transaction, the problematic one, log an error, and then try the same process again.
So the fix for the immediate consensus branch ID issue, that's going to be in the version of Zebra that is sort of currently pending release, is that right?
Yeah, it's in 2.10, and we
Oh, it's already in 2.10.
yeah.
And then but the additional check on block templates is going to be in the next release, is that right?
I don't know if it's going to be in the next release, but
okay.
It will be in a release, but I don't know if we make it into the next one.
I'd encourage you to prioritize it because so the proportion of mining power that sort of gets backed by Zebra is going to be increasing as people prepare for Zcash deprecation. So
yeah,
this is going to become a more significant problem.
Yep. So Zebra 2.10 has the fix for the consensus branch ID, and a transaction that doesn't use the right one will be refused right away. Another bug that we fixed was in the send row transaction that Han also reported. The issue there was that Zebra would return a TX ID even if the submitted transaction was refused. But that was that wasn't actually an issue with submitting transactions, just returning a TX ID where it shouldn't have been returned. And another thing that made it into the release is verification of transactions that spend mempool UTXOs, and this adds support for text transactions. And that's all for the release. That's all for me.
Thank you, Marek. Any other questions for Marek? Or we can move. We should probably move on. So yeah, there's write to us on the forum if you have more questions, or there's R&D Discord. Next up, Zcash deprecation. Javier saying no, CLI wallet Zebra. I don't think I see anyone working on saying no on the call today. So maybe we can talk about progress on the new CLI wallet, if any.
Strand Chris?
Sorry, I'm muted. So there's a we have the general framework for for the app is over in the Zcash/wallet repository. And the next thing we'll be working on after the PCZT related stuff gets in is building out the framework for the binary that runs around the Zcash client backend based interface. So and actually my plan is also to ensure that the architecture for how sends are done directly leverages PCZTs, because that will give us instant hardware wallet support in there as well, which would be nice, or HSM support for backends. So not too much update on the actual binary itself now, but that's going to be the next thing that we have updates on.
Great. Thank you, Jack. On the Zebra side, we've mostly been building out the RPC methods that we need to support. Well, that we don't currently expose, that we know that people will need. We had a very productive call last week where we went through all of the different we finished going through all the RPC methods that we think we might need to implement. So I think we have quite a clear picture now of what existing users of Zcash need and where those are going to be supported. So for us, it's just a matter of going through the list and implementing, exposing those into Zebra. They're already, most of the functionality is implemented. We just need to expose it.
Billy, how optimistic are you from on a scale from 1 to 100%?
So I'm that's a mean question. I'm not going to answer it directly. I'm just going to say that my main source of concern is about the unknowns, the partners that need things that they've not told us about. So it's all those people that we know currently use Zcash that we're trying to reach out to, that are not, because implementing the RPC methods is straightforward enough, right? We just need to expose the functionality. But the actual integration, the getting people to actually tell us and then switch over, that's what I'm least confident on. The implementation
did the message get through that we're collecting uses? So there's like a big message out there. If you, like, what's the flag? Like, how do I recognize myself as concerned by this work?
And you know, it's how do we reach out to people? Are they not interested? Do they not trust that I am or we are who we say we are? Because quite frankly, if someone reached out to me cold like that, I'd be like, well, what are they trying to sell to me? What are they trying to get from me? So I kind of get, it's a hard ask, but you know, Paco's doing a great job on the outreach front, just being really relentless there. I pitch in where I can and just try and make sure that you know, I process the results and update, and actually I still need to.
So let's use the FOMO method. That's how crypto works, right? So everybody out there, if you're listening, we're all looking for uses for the RPCs. Move yourself and get yourself known, because it's happening now.
The real FOMO here is let us know what your use cases are, or the methods you need will be going away.
Yes.
Right.
Awesome.
We're coming up with a new, less I don't know, more urgent, less friendly messaging for the outreach, because like time has passed and it's, you know, kind of like FOMO. And we're also mentioning the fact that some methods will go away, and that even though they use them and they say they use them, they might go away because they're just deprecated. So that we need, and like we're not guaranteeing one-to-one implementation, and like things that will, I don't know, put a sense of urgency, and that things will break if we don't take action.
We'll have that end of the carrot versus stick approach, the stick there is going to come more into force early next year, because the next Zcash release, one of the things it's going to include, or probably the main thing it's going to include, is marking all the RPC methods that we're not intending to migrate over as deprecated.
Yeah.
Now, in that first release, it won't have any effect on anyone who's not paying attention, but anyone who is paying attention will be able to proactively deprecate those and test where in their stack it breaks. The release after that will turn those from default enabled to default disabled. That's the point at which everyone who isn't paying attention is going to be very aware that stuff is happening.
Yes.
That release will still let them re-enable those methods, so they will not be they won't be prevented from still running their business, but they will have to take a step there if they haven't so far. And so the latest at which someone who's not paying attention is going to notice from that perspective is after the next release of Zcash D reaches its EOS halt, and people upgrade to the one after that has a default disabled. Unless you're someone who has been building your own Zcash D node and changing the EOS halt, in which case you're choosing to be your own support, in which case you kind of need to be paying attention.
So I have a suggestion, which is to default disable some methods where we want to know whether people are using them. And that way we will get feedback on whether people are using them, because they'll have to re-enable them and they will complain.
That is true. And there's nothing that prevents us from deprecating something and then undeprecating it. So we could choose to just be more liberal in what we deprecate and only leave undeprecated the things that we know we will be supporting exactly as they currently are. And we can
I think that's a good idea.
Anything that's being deprecated, anything that is even having its interpretation changed in some way, we deprecate in order to force people to be aware of that fact.
I think that will only work if we default deprecate them, I think.
Yes, yeah. So that would be in not this coming release, but the next one.
Yeah.
I was suggesting this coming release because it's not that much work for them to re-enable them.
Yeah, it sounds kind of aggressive, no?
Well, it is, but I think
to be honest, I don't think we have much choice, because what Peely pointed out, like if you're receiving these emails, if it's easy to disregard them or just group them with probably tons of emails that are like fake airdrops and whatever, because you can't like verify the emails or like make sure that the people asking the information is really who they say they are, or they can't know what we're going to do with it, or they have to trust that they have to trust that with that information if it's like not fully public on their side. So the email outreach has this like practical limitation that maybe if you're totally not trusting anybody, which is what you should do in crypto, you may disregard it.
or it may not get to the right people.
As well. Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm just thinking about the timeline, because we don't have very many Zcash D releases left.
No.
And we need that information on what methods people are using and what they will complain about. We need that relatively quickly.
Well, the current active Zcash D release 6.0.0 reaches EOS January 22nd. So if we stuck out a release that just deprecated everything, your node just stops working. That's a bit extreme, but I guess
I wasn't suggesting that, but I like the idea.
Yeah, I'm put it this way: I'm wary of doing that this year, because I don't want people to be in a situation where they upgrade. Oh, there's a new release. They upgrade right before Christmas and before the holidays.
Oh no,
then everything.
No, I was thinking after Christmas.
Right,
doing it before Christmas is a disaster.
Yeah, but if we do it,
they won't be able to do anything other than re-enabling them.
Right.
They'll
but
automatically do that.
But if we put out a release just after Christmas, that gives people 3 weeks of overlap, which is a little tighter on the if that was to be the deprecation point, that's a little tight for people to upgrade.
I mean, if they have a problem, they can re-enable those methods, but they're more likely to tell us about it.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Dodger. You have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, and this is relaying something that came from DC, whether in January or whenever, change Zcash D so that it automatically shuts down unless you've set a specific config flag. Like a config flag says, I'm aware that Zcash D is going away equals 1 or something like that. And just really simple. It forces them. It means that they don't have to recompile, don't have to do anything crazy. But as a first step, it just makes sure that people are aware.
Yeah, and actually,
I mean, if you default disable a method that you think is really commonly used, that effectively has the same.
Yes, but actually, this is a nice idea, because we actually did the same thing with Zcashd at the very beginning, where if you run Zcashd and you've not created a config file, it won't start. You have to, at a minimum, create the empty config file to confirm that you're happy with the default settings. This would be an equivalent thing, and it would let us put a message there to just like, it's another spot that we could reach to people. So actually coupling that with default enabled would be I'd be happy rolling that out with a short EOS halt support window this year, because then we could just tell people in the message, hey, we've default enabled, we've deprecated a bunch of these methods. Please go through, disable them in turn, check what fails, tell us if it fails, and also tell people we're going to be default disabling them for the next release. Blah. Yeah, I like that.
Just to clarify,
yeah, go on.
Just to clarify, the idea there isn't to find out what methods people use. The idea is to make sure that people are aware of and are going to respond to the fact that Zcash is going away.
Yeah. It enables us to serve both purposes there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We can have the message say both that it's going away, and please tell us about the deprecated methods that you have to enable.
Whereas just doing the deprecation doesn't enables it to show the context there.
Yeah.
I was going to say that Paku is working on a Google form to collect this information.
Yeah,
I wonder
so
if
we could just include that link in there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Okay. I think that kind of covers the ecosystem outreach. There might be people from Single Labs here, disguised as alternative Pakus, that might want to give an update on Say No. Just going to give an opportunity.
Oh,
otherwise, we'll move on.
Strad, can you file a ticket about that for Zcash?
Yep.
Hey.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was a bit late. I thought it was 4 o'clock UTC today, not 3 o'clock. So I've been a bit unwell this week. I'm just catching up yesterday and today. We've been going through, there's been this reg test bug in Zebra that it's now changed to where blocks are not being rejected, but the transactions, any transactions in blocks with Coinbase funds are being rejected. So I opened an issue in Zebra yesterday regarding that. So I think it does look like a Zebra issue now. I was worried before it was could be wallet, but it looks like it's that Zebra is actually rejecting those transactions.
Yep, great. I think Gary wants to respond.
So have you guys checked that the consensus branch ID and the transactions are correct for the network upgrade that's active?
I have not. No, I'll take a note of that and check that.
The other thing, since you said it was, is it related to spending Coinbase?
Yes.
So there's a 100 block limitation that you have to have 100 confirmations in order to spend Coinbase. So you're taking that into account.
Yeah, no, so we are we're generating over 100 blocks so that it should be spendable at that point.
Okay. Presumably Zebra implements that correctly because that's a consensus issue. I hope it is.
It does.
Okay.
Arya, what about the issue that you're working on right now? Is this not related, or is it to be able to spend before the 100 blocks on breakfast?
No, so the issue I'm working on is Coinbase inputs can be spent to transparent outputs instead of forcing them to be shielded. But I think that the test is doing that correctly. I think the issue is just the consensus branch IDs.
Okay. Well, we'll look at it offline. Then we'll prioritize that. Thanks for reporting, and thank you for creating the issue. Any other items on Zcash deprecation or comments?
I do have a small update that we are working with Blockchain Commons and Zingo on the wallet export format and that part of the graph. So they present a grant to ZZG that covers the new format for storing wallet information and in an interoperable and interchangeable format. And then the exporting from the old .dat files to the new format, it will be, I don't know, a separate thing that other teams might do. So that's a small update we have. We're working towards having someone do the new format.
Yeah, so we had the meeting about that yesterday, I think. And so in terms of Zcash deprecation, I think that grant will be focused more on what is the new thing that we should do, rather than what is directly necessary for the deprecation, because we don't want the new format to be encumbered by things that it doesn't need to be. So there are basically two strategies for how you migrate. You can either sweep the old sources of funds and send them to a new wallet, and then kind of forget about the old ones, and that works in some cases. But in cases where you have addresses that have been exported and you don't know whether there are people are going to send new funds to those addresses, you have to have a way for the new wallet to know about those addresses, and they might not be in the zip32 derivation tree. So that needs to be supported. The other issue is that metadata about past transactions should be supported in the new format. And so there may be transactions that, even if they couldn't be created by a new wallet, it's necessary to be able to represent them in a history.
Let's move on because we have a lot more to get through still. So next up, research and implementation updates. Conrado, do you have something on Frost?
Yep. So we're working on the Frost server. We basically finish up a couple of things that we needed for real world usage of the server. Like we had the timeouts, we had HTTPS support, stuff like that, and also on the Frost client, which is a tool that integrates with the server. We had the support for multiple sessions and removing contacts and groups. So that's done, it's done the review. So we kind of finished. I mean, there's probably a lot of small adjustments and cleanups that we might want to do, but the main part I think is done. Other than ongoing work on the DKG support for the server, we're working on that. So I think that's the last big piece missing. And with that, we're planning to begin to do an audit of both the Frost server and the client code that interacts with it. So that's exciting. Also, now that PCCTs are going to be released soon, we might want to take a look and update our tool to support it. We have a tool that can sign Frost transactions, but only supports the Y wallet transaction plan. So we'll likely take a look at the PCCT and support that too, which is also interesting. I think that's it.
So do we know what extensions, sort of just roughly not going into the detail, might be necessary to support in PCT to support Frost?
Yeah, that's. I think I added a comment in the design PR about that. It's like there's not like it's strictly needed. Like we can use Frost using regular PCTs, but it might be interesting to include some fields. We could like there are multiple ways to do it. I'm not sure what's the best one. Like Frost has there's concept of a signing package, which is basically the message when to sign and the commitments. So we might include this inside the PCT or do the other way around, like send the PCT, include the sign package inside the PCT. So yeah, basically maybe we need like a signing package field if you want to do this way around. We might want to like when you do Frost signing and the participants generates the signing share. This signing share might be returned as a PCCT. I'm not sure if that's needed because the signing share is just like 32 bytes and using a whole PCCT to transport that seems overkill, but that might be useful for some contexts. So yeah, I think the only fields I can think about are the signing package, which will be the signing commitments. When you're sending a transaction for someone to sign, and in the return of that process, the signing share. Yeah, PCT you could use the proprietary key value section for that, but yeah, if it might be useful to also standardize how this is done.
Yeah, the intention is to eventually standardize something. Indeed, you could use the proprietary section to prototype things, but that's intentionally arbitrary and not something that people should assume they can know what something in there means.
Okay, let's move on from first, if that's okay. Trading finality layer, we can give an update on that today. If anyone.
Yes.
Hey,
Nate here. Yeah, I just posted an update to the forum. The recent update is that we've finished the first pass of defining the scoping, and then we've created a list of target engineering deliverables. And those, here, let me post the link to chat. The engineering deliverables include a full node with appropriate APIs, a tool to run a validator, which is likely to be bundled with the full node, and then a tool that can do stake delegations. So this would need to be, it would have some wallet functionality, but it isn't something we would recommend to users. Instead, it would just be for like developers to verify that the full end-to-end functionality works. Those are the three main components. And then the continuous integration is, I consider that sort of like an explicit deliverable to define all the testing that happens and hopefully some of the deployment also. Then we have other deliverables, including a suite of documentation, and I would like feedback on that. And then a third thing is, as we were working on this document, it became clear that we're like trending towards a strategy where in order to know how well we're on track to actually be useful to end users, we want to be engaging with different kinds of stakeholders that are representative, like wallet teams, exchanges, people who are interested in validating early on, be getting their feedback as we go. So down the road, we'll want to like start formalizing those connections. Those are the main updates. We're also continuing to look for candidates to hire. So engineers, we would like to hire 2 or 3 engineers. And I had one request. If there's anyone familiar with Zebra's CI, it would be helpful for me to have a tour. It's much more sophisticated than I expected, which is awesome to see. But I'm trying to figure out how Shielded Labs can safely and sensibly run a subset of it on GitHub for our own prototyping work without getting in Zebra's way.
Yeah, I'll connect you with Gustavo. That's
okay.
That's definitely doable.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So on the specification of crosslink 2, I had planned to get more of it done before I sort of go on holiday, which is I'm going on Saturday. What I think I'll do is just mark the bits that are not finished yet and push that up sort of immediately, probably today, just so that it's not languishing in my local repo.
Cool. We still need to build out our roadmap, but just while I'm here, my intention is to start prototyping, and then if we run into like unanswered design gaps or unspecified things, to basically come up, like improvise something that seems like it should work as we're building the prototype, but to document whenever we do that, so that we sort of end up with like something that runs, but it might not be safe, and we have kind of a trail of how to follow up and make it more rigorous.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything that you want to ask me about Crosslink 2 specifically, although I'll be on holiday, I'm on Signal. Yeah, you can distract me. I just might not respond immediately.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, any other questions or we move on? Let's move on. Network sustainability mechanism. Who
Yeah,
wants to talk about that?
I can go. So the update since the last call is that we heard back from the zip editors via Josh Swihart regarding a few different options for how to proceed. And we've decided to develop zip 234, which is smoothing the issuance curve, and zip 235, which is burning 60% of transaction fees behind 2 separate feature flags. Our plan is to continue to gauge sentiment over the next couple months for smoothing the issuance curve and everything around zip 234, and then demonstrate support by the testnet deadline of March 1st, 2025. Paul and Mariusz, who are on the call, go ahead.
And we did a poll of developers.
Oh yeah, so we've done some polling. We did a poll of coin holders that came back similar to the Zec Hub, which was unanimous support for the NSM. You know, these polls are experimental, and there were some issues that were reported, so obviously they should be taken with a grain of salt, but there were still over like around 250,000 Zec that were voted with, which is significant. And then what Zuko said is we did a Helios poll with ecosystem engineers. There were about 34 people who the poll went out to. 53% responded, and the results were 12 saying yes to include the NSM in NU7 and 5 no. So one person didn't vote, but submitted.
So when you say the NSM there, what was the question? Was the question about all three zips
Yeah,
together,
the question
or?
was so there was it went to you as well, but so the background information
I probably
outlined.
didn't see it. I'm behind on email.
Okay, so the background information outlined all three zips, and then the question simply said, hey, take a look at this background information. Do you support including the NSM in NU7? And then the possible answers were yes and no.
Okay.
So the reason is because, you know, we see this as a sort of like initial sentiment gathering, and it really gives us the opportunity to gauge like general support for the project, right? Versus drilling down into like specific options. But I think, you know, there are other ways that we can pull in the future.
Yeah, I mean, if I've seen that in time, I wouldn't really know how to answer it, because I support 233 at the moment. I think I support 233 and 234, but not 235.
Yeah. Okay, so then I think that, you know, over the next weeks to months, we can pull on those specific questions as well.
Can you
it's a little
specify? Can you specify what's 234 and 235?
Oh, sorry. 233 is the basic mechanism with burning and the burn amount field in V6. 234 is issuance smoothing and reintroduction of funds via block subsidies, and 235 is requiring, as a consensus rule on Coinbase transactions, that 60% of fees are bent.
The thing to remember with polling on separate questions is that the majority of the community isn't like in the weeds on the engineering like specifications, right? So
I understand that.
yeah.
I thought that specific poll was going to engineers.
It was, yeah, but yeah, it was high level. Fair enough. Conrado?
Conrado, yeah.
Yeah, I posted a suggestion. The forums probably got lost in the middle of so many messages. But I was thinking about the smoothing of the issuance curve. Like I think from what I understand, the main reason is that it's the simplest way to issue from the NSM. So thinking about it, I was wondering if it would be possible to. You could do the same thing, like the smoothing out. The way the smoothing out works is basically at each block you issue like a fraction of the total unissued amount, and the specific fraction there that in the end does 50% in each 4 years. But I was thinking, could we just like do the same thing, the exact same thing, like issue a fraction of the total, but not the total uninsured amount, but the total amount of deposits into NSM. Like, don't keep track of both the like, don't bundle the unissued amounts with the NSM. Just keep track of the NSM by itself and do the exact same thing. Like,
does that end up being equivalent?
No, because we keep the halvings, right? We won't lose the halvings. The regular issues will be the same. Like each block you issue a specific amount.
Yeah.
Because my main worry with the smoothing out of issuance is like, I don't know, it's unexpected, both technical difficulties or just people's expectations of how the cash is issued. Like people like this issuance has always looked like this and will completely change. So that's my main worry. And this would, I think, fix this, but maybe I'm missing something.
So I would like for Nate to opine on this, because I believe that he did consider this when he originally brought up the NSM.
Yeah, I can't opine on it on the spot. Let me think about a moment. Yeah, one issue. So I agree that could keep the halvings, and it might be less surprising to some users. One issue though is that it does cause there to be kind of two different categories of unissued ZEC, or two different balances. And that one thing I'm kind of wary about, which is one reason I supported changing the name away from fund, is that I didn't want people to see the balances as like just a fund that's effectively discretionary or could be spent through governance or otherwise down the road, including like, maybe regulators or policy people or anything like that. So I guess I saw the single kind of issuance is simpler conceptually and less likely to have that confusion. But yeah, there are trade-offs that I'm open to thinking about as a group, as a community.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think
Go ahead.
what I'll do like next week is open up the discussion to ZIP 234 specifically, and we can broach that alternative at that point in time.
Cool.
One
Thank
one
you.
thing about one thing
Sorry,
about
when would that be?
Well, I would probably be at some point early next week.
Oh, on the forum.
Yeah, on the forum, just to
Okay.
open it up for community discussion on ZIP 234 specifically, and any possible alternatives we should consider.
Carry on, John?
Yeah, well, one thing about so it's the 235. I'm not. It's the burning part. We were trying to figure out if there were interactions with ZSA, and there's a whole thread on the forum, and then we did actually took a deep dive with the engineering. If we do move forward with enabling that feature, it might make sense to actually do that as fast as possible, because if there's an interaction with ZSA, one of the possible interactions is that we use that feature also on the fees of ZSA.
So the feature that is necessary in order to require that a certain amount of the issuance fee is burnt is 233, not 235. Because so 235 is requiring that 60% of fees overall are burnt. That there is an interaction of that with the issuance fee burning, because do you include the issuance, the burnt issuance fees in that 60%, or is it separate?
Yeah.
But in order to satisfy, so I believe Chris's motivation, which I agree with, in disincentivizing selfish mining attacks, in order to specify that, we only need 233.
Got it. Okay. So my point here is that we are following and interacting on the one that could be affecting the ZSA fees. There's work to do on ZSA, but I don't know, maybe we're next, so we can talk about it. But there's work to do on ZSA fees, and there's a question of like what's the order and what's more efficient. If this goes in, if we know that it's going in, that we might want to like get it in really quickly so that we can develop the feed, knowing that's running.
Yeah, you basically need to know whether 233 is getting in fairly soon.
Right.
But 235 might also help.
In what
Even
sense?
though it's not necessary, like you say, but ZSAs might want to use 235 or just learn from 235 and do a similar thing or a different thing based on 235.
Maybe it's a good time to, oh, go on, Paul.
To what?
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just thinking we were just on a call with the Kedit guys, and my understanding is that the concept of burning that's being introduced with 233 is new. So before that, anything that destroyed funds was considered a mistake, right? And I think that's reflected in some of the ZSA consensus rules. So my understanding is that one of the effects of introducing 233 is that the idea of burning funds now becomes a possibility. And I think that affects the way the consensus is working for orchard bundles in ZSAs, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that's the main interaction with 233.
I got confused. Which one is the burn one?
That's 233. Yeah, the first one is introducing burning.
Okay, so I was talking about 233 the whole time, the burn one.
So I can answer the technical question here. In NU6 already, we now require that so the blocks balance exactly. And in NU6, and this is part of one of the other zips, the explicit fees zip, we will require that the fees are specified in the fee field. And so at that point, there will be no implicit loss of funds that don't balance within a transaction. So each individual transaction will exactly balance, and blocks will exactly balance. So that's happening anyway, independent of burning and independent of ZSAs. ZSAs are consistent with it in that they also follow the same principle. Everything is explicit about balance. But I don't think there's any sort of particularly difficult interaction there.
And my particular understanding was that there's a consensus rule specifying that tokens can be burned in orchard bundles, but not ZEC.
Correct, because the burn amount field does the same thing for ZEC. So it's just a matter of specifying only one way to do things. ZEC is burnt using the if 233 gets in, ZEC is burnt using the burn amount field. Regardless, if CSAs get in, then non-native assets, I think that's what they're called, the non-ZEC assets can be burnt via a burn bundle.
Okay, that makes sense. But I guess that was, for me, the question, like, is that an explicit choice, and does that still make sense with 233 coming in? Or should we allow it as an option of like, well, you can burn things in different ways since the concept is now valid? Would it be convenient to, make it possible to burn in multiple different ways?
I mean, it's just a different representation of the same thing. You could sort of not have the burn amount field and then relax the rule on not burning ZEC within a burn bundle. I think,
but then you'd need to transfer any transparent funds.
No, I'm not arguing for that because we're past the deadline to be bike shedding about this, to be honest. And what's currently specified in the zips works perfectly well. So I'm not in favor of making that change, but I don't see any reason to make it.
Understood.
Yeah, so we're gonna be working hard on making sure that the fees in ZSA are working, with an eye on all the flags that are turned on for NU7, and testing all the variations. Like you said, Paul, we have to interact with your team and like all the different teams to make sure that that this works with all the features that are planned for NU7.
I'll let Jason go, and then we should move on to the ZSA update because we have around 18 minutes left, and we kind of wanted to discuss NU7. We've been doing some of that kind of peripherally, but go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, so it sounds like it has not yet been decided whether 233 is going into NU7. I sort of thought that it had. Is that the case? And if not, like, when will it be determined? Because, you know, we're ready to go forward with the integration work.
Jason, do you mind if we do the ZSA update and then we discuss that? Because that is exactly what we're going to discuss in like.
Oh, okay, cool.
Oh,
yeah.
well, hang
If you
on.
don't
There's
mind.
a procedural question here which a zip editor should answer.
Okay, go ahead.
Strad, what has been decided about what zips are going into NU7, if anything?
Technically nothing.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, the zip editors have given their view on what is what a suitable compatible set of updates is. At this point, it is up to node implementers to implement those. And at the end of the day, what actually gets decided on what goes in is what users run. But
Correct.
at this point, it is likely that the set of things that that in that post that were marked as suitable for inclusion are likely to be included. And for ZIP 233 specifically, if the change from a technical perspective is a small transaction format change, so the cost to inclusion is low. But I would refer you to the forum for the post about like the overall set, and we can talk about it further on.
Yeah, I mean the ball is in ZF's court because it's what Zebra implements, and so now that there is only one main, or will be from NU7, only one main consensus node implementation. There probably should be some procedure about ZF explicitly saying what they intend to implement for the next NU and maybe allowing objections to that, but that's not for me to decide.
Yeah, I think Dodger had a post that, I'm sorry, I'll let you move forward. Go ahead.
Yeah, I really, we're going into the NU7 discussion. I want to give Kedit an opportunity to give their update. So I'm just going to move on. We will talk about NU7 at the end. Who wants to go ahead on this?
Yeah, I think I'll start. So yeah, on the Zcash shielded assets side, let's see, we can start with zips. So we've been making various updates to the zips. It's some rearrangements. There have been like some issues that were raised last month. We've resolved, I think, most of the issues. I think some of those required, like I ended up making a rewrite to how I specify the consensus rules in the zips and so on. And I think it aligns better with how it is in the protocol now. I've mostly responded to all the issues. There was one issue regarding the row value in the issue notes, which we discussed this week, and we have a way forward. So yeah, I'll be making those changes to the zips as well and pushing all that together. We also made a change to the transaction format with a forward-looking view towards like not having an additional transaction format change for the swaps update, which ideally would be in the next NU. So that's like bringing action groups instead of just actions at a high level. And I've made that update in the zips. And we've also made those implementation changes in Orchard, Libra Zcash, and the Python test vectors. So there's a little bit of work left on our end to sort of make sure all these pieces are interacting properly. And yeah, we are reviewing all that at the moment. Another forward-looking addition that we have made is the reference notes feature that will be needed for asset swaps. This has been implemented in Orchard again, and I will be making the changes in the zip soon. Dara, any?
Yes, there was. I'm just trying to. My web browser is really slow, so I want to refer to the right thing. Anyway, so if you look at 967, the most recent issue on zips, Chris Stroud and I had a proposal for shielded Zcash computation that we think has a lot of advantages, and specifically, it reduces the chance that there will be we're boxing ourselves into a corner with respect to how Zcashes will work for asset swaps. As we had previously proposed how Zcashes would work for action bundles, there was going to be, and this would be in NU8, there was, we proposed that there be a flag in the orchard flags, which is per bundle, to specify whether the signature is over the whole transaction, which is something that you definitely need for the hardware wallet case, for example, or the action bundle, which is what you need for asset swaps. And that would be committed to sort of in the bundle, and it would be affecting data, so it would affect the transaction ID. That is not how Zcash variants work for the transparent protocol. So for the transparent protocol, there's a byte which is put after the signature, which sort of determines how the Zcash is computed for that signature. And that allows sort of, it defers the decision over what Zcash type to use to the point where the signature is actually being made, which is more flexible in some respects. So if you look at the issue that we posted on the Zips repo, which is basically just our notes that we wrote up from that meeting, it suggests how to get the same flexibility for shielded signatures, shielded Svendor signatures, and it has some motivations for doing it that way. So if we did that for the NU7 Zcash algorithm, then we would avoid sort of potentially having to change the Zcash in an incompatible way for NU8.
Okay, yeah, I'll take a look at this issue. I hadn't
thank you.
seen this before. Yeah.
Strad, have I summarized that correctly? Is there anything else you want to say about that?
The core point here essentially is that if we include asset group support in the V6 transaction format for NU7, currently how Zcashes are done in Zcash is there is one Zcash algorithm for one transaction version. The versions are in sync. And then within that, the transparent Zcash types allow you to specify behaviors that the Zcash algorithm enforces. What that would mean is if we include asset groups in NU7, then the defining the asset group Zcash needed for asset swaps would be on the NU7 critical path. And if for whatever reason we got it wrong, then we would need to make a new transaction version V7 to fix it. We would not be able to fix it as a change to the Zcash algorithm without breaking the property that you can validate transactions like signatures when you see a transaction completely independently of the chain. And so this proposal essentially allows you to decouple it by essentially letting you version the Zcash algorithm relative to a transaction version.
Yes. So that has some nice some nice consequences. For example, if you get it wrong, you can do a restricting change, which works better as an emergency change to turn off that variant. If you only ever have one version of the Zcash for a given transaction version, then it's essentially free in terms of complexity and security analysis cost. So it has some really nice properties.
Nate, was your is this in the same?
Yeah, it's just a kind of a basic question. Is there? I want to learn more about asset swaps as a user. Is there like a guide or a tool like how to execute them, how to create them as a user yet? Or
So we have the zip, right? Are you talking of like from an implementation point of view, or from?
Yeah, like like if I wanted to create an asset swap transaction.
I can take that, Vivek. So asset swap currently is we talked about it in the zips, and there's a beginning of implementing it. There's a whole work on aspects of it, but you don't have today a transaction tool that supports asset swaps in fully. It's still being developed. There's a whole aspect also of putting one transaction in front of another and matching them, like a sort of matcher for this. It's I think we don't really have time to dive into it, but it's cooking right now, this entire thing.
That's good.
If it's okay, Pili, I want to just give a few points on ZSA that are kind of zoom out. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, like if I can just like take a minute and just finish the quick technical updates also, then I'll like hand it over to you. So like just to wrap that up, like we updated also the Orchard and Halo 2 books and documentation. We have a draft of that ready, which I mean we are reviewing internally at present. On the Zebra side, we've been working closely with the Zcash Foundation, and I think making good progress with getting new RPC functionalities and testing them and so on. We've been working on a demo for showing the general ZSA functionality using Zebra and Zcash transaction tool. And yeah, we also just got back the audit report from least authority. So like it was pretty positive. I haven't fully gone through it, but I think, yeah, I can hand it to John now. And
thanks. So the overall message here is that we're finally at a point where ZSA is ready to be merged in Zcash. The zips are through. I sent this this link to the discussion on the forum. We still get comments and changes that mean that we need to re-implement bits and pieces of it, but the zips are through. Like Vivek said, just today, a few hours ago, we got back the audit from least authority, and it seems there's no major issues. Everything looks actually the quote is kind of like very high quality, and then we're now taking the Zebra ZSA node and running it live so that we can see that that exact node will be running against current Zcash, so that at least we have the backward compatibility, the clock on it starting now. So basically, there's a shift in how serious this is in terms of being in the protocol, and I want to thank like everybody involved, like in this call. I think there's something that as a community we managed to send like a clear message of here's NU7, here's what's coming, and yeah, we talk about the interactions and the specifics, but like it's one of the first like moments of clarity going forward, and it's the biggest change in like the functionality of the protocol that's gonna land. So it's we're very excited. That's what I wanted to say. There's a lot of value that's been created over the years and is now going to be, it's like a step. It's going to be out real soon. So that involves the test nets. It involves the talks with the community and getting that in the hands of developers so that they can run it. Personally running ZSA on my own machine with this transaction tool and just going through the readmes and getting the Dockers up and seeing it, basically seeing again what was on Zcash, but this time with like a modern Zebra in Rust was a huge moment, and we kind of celebrated it in the company. So big message here is like, this is ready for merging. So we will do everything that we can to assist the merging of this in the implementations, and that's like that's going to be the work going towards the freeze and the test nets and launch of NU7. We're all geared to do it. So yes, there's asset swap work and there's other things that we're doing, but as a team, we're here to make sure that Zebra can take this and have this kind of blessed. That's the zoom out message.
Yeah. I just want to say congratulations. It's been a ton of work. It's high quality work. Thank you. So in terms of the next step, I am strongly in favor. So speaking as ECC's R&D engineering manager, speaking as sort of a protocol designer and advisor to the zip editors. I don't know whether that's been formalized yet. I'm strongly in favor of including ZSAs, and more specifically in the short term, while they're still behind sort of feature flags and effectively turned off, of reviewing the code to make sure that it isn't making any inadvertent consensus changes to NU6. And once that's been done, I think that is the only blocker on merging the code, as far as I'm concerned. And obviously, Zebra is ZF's project, and that will have to be reviewed by ZF engineers as well. But that's from my point of view, and I think I'm okay in speaking for ECC here, ECC's point of view in what the next step is.
There's of course always a logistic piece to it. So if I understood correctly, the ZCG will be needing your help to understand the amount of work that it takes to accompany all this. And if I understand correctly, it's in these calls that we talk about those logistics. So as a team, we prioritize that for 2025, making sure that ZSA finally lands and unlocks that value for the. I think it's already apparent in the fact that this is so focused. That list for NU7 is already being taken into account by the community.
Thank you, John. Congratulations. We are kind of at time, but I know there's an appetite for discussing NU7. I personally have to drop off now. I have a hard stop. Doja can take over the call if people want to stay on and continue discussing NU7. Please do so. Otherwise, thank you from me, and I'll see you in the new year.
And in case anybody else is dropping off, we are going to skip the next Arborist call, which is on the 26th of December. So we'll next see you in January, on 9th of January, in the earlier slot.
All right.
Thanks, Peely.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
All
And
right.
just before we delve into NU7, just also want
I'm going to
to
drop off.
I just also want to say that we are organizing a dev summit in Sofia in March to be taking place just before ZK proofs. So anybody who's going to be in Sofia, planning to visit there for RWC, hacks, ZK proofs, please consider joining us for a dev summit. It's going to be kind of an unstructured, or well, I say unstructured, but the content and the agenda will be determined by the attendees, rather than it being something that we're gonna dictate from ZF. So go ahead, Darren.
Yeah, so the scheduling of that, I believe that so there's one day of that that is before hacks and ZK proof, and then I think the forum post says that the sort of optional hack day for the Zcash thing would be on the same day as the first day of hacks and ZK proof, which is
so it's not really a hack day
I mean,
so much as just a co-working day.
Co-working day. Okay. Right. So that means I would not be at that co-working day. Probably Stride will not be there. It seems kind of a little bit suboptimal to put it there.
Well,
Suboptimal progress over perfection.
There's more suboptimality in hacks and ZK proofs overlapping, unfortunately.
Yes.
Let me just say a word on that. So I sat down with Trevor several times trying to figure out how do we do this, because we all wanted the pre-real world crypto slot. They don't co-locate with real world crypto exactly on the location because they want to be a bit remote on purpose, because they want very intense focused talks, and we understand their format. They wanted to have this year much more focus on zero knowledge proof people, and a lot of focus on formal verification, which is exactly what we wanted to bring to Sofia right before real world crypto. So what we did was understand that they start the day, very intense day, and then the first day of ZK proof actually starts at 4:30 in the afternoon in the lightest possible way for a ZK proof, which is kind of workshops that probably Daniel Ben-Arosh is going to run, and keynotes that are kind of like vision, but probably not like deep dive into hardcore cryptography. Then day two are topics that are super interesting, identity, TLS notarization, things like this, and lots of advances in zero knowledge in general that are going to be interesting. But we realized that there's a few people that will not be in ZK proof for day two because they'll be very busy doing hacks. But that's taken into account. So we're not going to be having roles or anything that we expect the people in hacks participate in ZK proof. But then day three is a whole day on ZK VMs and formal methods, the verified verifier, Plonk standardization, and like this needs focus from everyone, so everyone is there, and that's also coordinated with hacks.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I've decided to be there on ZK Proof day 3, even though I've been missing the hack day for hacks. Yeah, I'll be there.
Awesome. I gotta drop off, but thanks everyone for this call.
Thank you.
So does anybody else have any questions or comments or issues to raise regarding NU7?
So there was a point that came up earlier, which is when is it formally decided which zips are going into NU7, and how is it decided?
That's a really good question. So I'll share what my view is. I'd hoped that there would be consensus around this, between the zip editors and the core engineering teams and the various parties who are putting forward proposals. That clearly doesn't seem to be the case. So
I mean, it doesn't seem to be the case for zip 235, to be more specific.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of concerns raised about making it impossible to spend sprout funds as well. So what I think we probably need to do is look to the community for some guidance. And I think what we can say to the community is, would you like to see these features included in an upcoming network upgrade? And I'm thinking about how we ask this, which ones would you like to see prioritized? And now I think this is a foregone conclusion. I'll be frank. I think, I'd be very, very surprised if the community were to come back and say anything other than we want to see both ZSAs and NSM included. I'll be interested to see their reaction on making it impossible to spend sprout funds. And I would expect that they will prioritize ZSAs over NSM. So at that point, I think so we go to the community for whether a feature should be added to the Zcash protocol, and if so, how it gets prioritized. And then, as you alluded to, Dara, it's really then down to the core engineering team. So in the case of like the Orchard Crate and Libra Zcash, that's ECC. In the case of Zebra, that's ZF. To look at to consider whether they are comfortable that the proposed set of included zips are going to fall within the complexity budget. And I will say that we've discussed this internally at ZF, and there is cautious optimism that both ZSAs and NSM can be included, although modulo 235. So yeah, I'm gonna stop talking and let the vast queue of people have their say, starting off with Paul.
Thanks. Yeah, so my question is mainly one about process. If my understanding is that the zip editors have put forward a list of zips that are acceptable or sort of seem compatible for inclusion with NU7, and that includes 233. And then it's a question of like getting the implementations ready. So in our case, the implementations for 233 are already there in PRs. And my question is there anything you'd like us to do? I know that kind of the code is behind feature flags right now. Are we just in the queue, or is there anything you'd like us to work on?
Was that a question to the zip editors?
It was a question of process. I'm afraid I'm not sure who's responsible for the next stage.
Okay, so I'll put my zip editor hat on for a moment and speak to this point. So as for the given network upgrade, the process that we have sort of evolved towards over the years is generally that for the different kinds of zips that are proposed or going into a different network upgrade, some of them will interact with common core in a sense, like the transaction format and things like that. And so the common that bit is specified after the various zips that are going to go in have sufficient are sufficiently clear that it's going to be in, that it's worth combining. The thing that we went through and did as zip editors posted to the forum was us figuring out what was a feasible from both in terms of complexity budget, but also in terms of implementation timelines and interactions, and you can read all the things we said about it there. But the combination of things that's there that specifically affects the transaction format, of which zip 233 is one of the ones that gets included. The next stage there is the zip editor sitting down and figuring out what the transaction format would be, assuming that those things that get included. From memory, because I'm a bit frazzled for the last couple of weeks, but from memory, nothing that affects the zip, the transaction format was like a strong no anywhere. The only thing that's a question mark is was the asset groups as to where that went in. But the aforementioned issue on the zips repo, which arose again, for the transaction format and the SIG hashing is all sort of, it's under that purview of the zip editors sort of need to figure that bit out, taking input from like the ZSA zips to find what they need in the transaction format and so on and so forth. But synthesizing that together is that falls under the zip editors. And that couples with also the Zcash algorithm, taking the various inputs and making sure that that's consistent for the protocol. And so, yeah, the only thing that I'm aware of is like a possible problem was the asset groups stuff, but the proposed idea in the zips repo helps to reduce the risk there and narrow what needs to be done. So as far to wind back then to specifically zip 233, because zip 233 from a transaction format perspective is very simple, that will just get included as part of the work to figure out the transaction format and figure out the final specification for that, which will very likely be quite close to what's already in various implementations and places, but essentially synthesizing that together falls under that. And then as far as the implementation goes for zip 233, that would be relevant to the Zebra developers, because it's using of that field and constraining of that field and consensus. So from that perspective, it would be the how the ZebraD team gets that into their code base.
Are they also responsible for Libra Zcash as well? Just confirming.
Libra Zcash is the ECC team. So if there are changes that are necessary, so related to the transaction formats, the transaction that ties into the ECC's implementation of the transaction formats in the Zcash primitives crate, and then I think Zebra has their own implementation of the transaction format in the Zebra crates. So once the transaction format is specified enough, then to be able to implement, then that will get implemented into the Zcash crates. Most likely, given that the largest contributor to the V6 format is ZSAs, getting the ZSA changes into the orchard crate below is likely to be the main thing that then drives through and gets the V6 format into the Libra Zcash crate.
Okay, so we're not expecting a PR to get merged or anything anytime soon. We're waiting for everything to kind of be formalized in the zip process before we start looking at code.
We tend to do specification first, but code in parallel-ish.
Yeah. Put it this way: anything that lands in before a spec is present for V6 transaction format, anything that lands in the Libra Zcash repo will be behind a config flag. So it won't even be a feature flag; it will be config flagged off. But with taking off my zip editor hat and putting on my ECC hat, I would very much like to see a V6 format implemented in Libra Zcash in the very near future for people to start testing with.
By the way, I think the sort of it's important for sort of procedure and separation of power and balance of power between ECC and ZF that it's the Zcash is being maintained by ECC and Zebra is being maintained by ZF. It helps to there might be some failure modes if it was just one organization sort of controlling all of the code that this helps to mitigate to a certain extent.
Right. I'm sorry, I'm gonna interrupt you there because we've got a lot of people with their hands up. That feels like a bit of a tangent.
That wasn't.
So I'm gonna call.
That wasn't the main point that I wanted to make. That I had my hand up for, which was that I think
Jason
we should have a poll question for ZIP 235 specifically.
Okay, Jason, please.
Yeah, there's an important technical consideration regarding ZIP 233 that Chris Nuttycombe raised, and that's that you can't open the transaction format for changes frequently. And it's already happening with ZSA. So it sounds like if we don't get it into NU7, that it can't be included in NU8. And if that's correct, then I think it's a very important issue that should be taken under close consideration when deciding what gets into NU7. And I'm thinking in the scenario where the community votes NSM a lower priority, it could impact it getting included into future network upgrades when the community is ready to prioritize the NSM.
Yes, I would say that one way of thinking about this, and certainly the way that I'm thinking about it, and would be delighted to hear from anybody who thinks this is a bad way of thinking about it, is that you could actually split 233 into a minimal change to the transaction format, which is just a placeholder field, the burn amount field, I believe it's called, and then but not implementing burning. But like I said, team is cautiously optimistic that can certainly be included, or the full 233. So yeah, we're fully aware of that, Jason, and ready to take that into account. Strad.
I've currently forgotten what I put my hand up for, but just to riff off that, the same kind of concern applies to asset groups. So currently, ZSAs can be implemented by just changes to the circuit, changes to the bundle format, just for ZSAs. But to do asset swaps, you need this additional change to be able to represent asset groups. And if for whatever reason that can't be pinned down on the NU7 critical path and isn't included, then to do asset swaps would require another transaction format change. And so it's not to say that there wouldn't be something later to go into, but that it's one of those ones where, and this is something that we sort of mentioned within the viability assessment of things, is that like the opportunity cost of adding something in to a format change is it. If you can get the small stuff in while the big stuff's going on, then it's worth doing so. And the ZIP 233, as we noted there, it's a trivial transaction format change. The consensus rules are non-trivial, but that's a separable, manageable piece. So so whether ZIP 233 in terms of implementation ends up being in or not, I think it's almost, not to speak fully on behalf of every ZIP editor, but I believe it's likely that the field will end up in the V6 format purely because it's a simple field to include. You don't really pay any cost if it ends up never being used just in the format. And we're already making a change for ZSAs, so it's the right time to do that kind of thing. As far as like 234 and other things go that would apply consensus meaning to it, those are you need it to be in the transaction format first, and so getting it in there would be the priority. Similar to the shielded Zcash versioning that Derima mentioned earlier, same thing there. Getting a single byte per signature, Orchard signature in to enable something there. Even if we never use that flexibility, getting it in means that we have it there, because we've generally, as a principle for Zcash, gone with not having our transaction formats be flexible or ambiguous, rather, because that can cause significant analysis problems further down the line. So instead, being explicit and like, yep, we're going to pop this field in, even if it's just consensus set to 0. The field being present and explicit that it's there is better than trying to like shove it in later. I had something else, but I can't remember what my hand was actually up for. So I will join the back of the queue for that and try and remember.
Marek.
Regarding Strad mentioning the 2 implementations of transactions, one in Zebra and one in Libra Zcash, we were discussing replacing the implementation in Zebra by the one in Libra Zcash. And we mentioned it to Kedit engineers, and they were in favor of doing that. So if there's like further interest or motivation of doing this, then we could prioritize this work internally.
If you think that's a viable route going forwards for that, then I'm perfectly fine with that. Yeah, it sort of gets into the vein of like I've sort of encountered this a little bit with the PCZT stuff. Whereas I mentioned before, I explicitly tried to set up in a way that you didn't have to depend on the orchard or sapling crates if you weren't aware of, if you didn't need to be aware of those pieces. I've been attempting on the side to do a similar thing with the transaction format in our library. Haven't succeeded yet, but I have a bunch of WIP work that's sort of along those lines to be able to make it easier for someone who's just like, I just have orchard support. I don't want to pay the cost of the sapling crypto crate, but I still want to generate transactions. That's a direction that I'm hoping to bring our format into. So if you think that would be useful from a Zebra perspective, then that would also potentially be a benefit there. Obviously, in the context of Zebra, you need to understand all the protocols because it's a consensus node implementation. So from a node perspective, that flexibility wouldn't matter. But from a development perspective, it would be interesting to have more perspectives on what would be the most usable from that perspective.
Yeah, we had a conversation with Aria. I can't remember whether you were there as well, Marek, in Montreal, where I think the plan we discussed there was to make the current ZebraD transaction type be so a simple wrapper over the Libra Zcash one, and that way it would reduce the scope of immediate changes that need to be made to Zcash. So that still seems like a good approach
Zebra, but yeah.
Sorry, to ZebraD.
Yeah.
Nate.
Yeah, sorry, I had two things. So one was for zip 233. I got a little confused what it means to include the format change without the consensus rule, because it sounds like that, because I may be missing details, but I thought if the format change allows a ZEC balance, then we definitely need a consensus rule to ensure ZEC isn't created. Otherwise, and if that is true, if that is true, that is already burning. There's no other definition of burning because those funds can't be spent. So the only
proposal would be the proposal would be to have a consensus rule that field is 0.
Okay, that difference makes sense, but to me it seems like there's no complexity difference between those two options. So I don't see how
the question is whether the community wants burning at all.
But it's already possible to burn. This just allows wallets to make it.
I agree. I think you're right.
Okay.
So I think the answer will be yes.
To me, it seems odd to say we'll put basically we'll put the whole thing in there, but then disallow it. But all that does is it means burns can't be explicit. They can only continue to be sort of implicit. But I don't know. For me, it just doesn't make sense to go to strike that balance.
The zip editor's recommendation was to include 233
as a whole.
Yeah. Okay.
It would only be if, for example, there were concerns raised further down the chain, like implementation complexity or over complexity budget for Zebra to be able to deploy, or something raised in the community. Further that I think at this point would make it likely that zip 233 wouldn't go in, because I also agree, as was just noted in the zip technical assessment, that like the ability to bring it in is very simple.
Okay. The other piece I had was for zip 235. There's a different route that seems plausible and also maybe safer, or there's a different route that's possible. So rather than making that rule a consensus rule, if it were excluded from consensus, then we could, if Zebra wanted to, we could make
You can make it a
either an
standard rule,
opt-in
yeah.
or opt-out standard rule, and
Yeah.
see and sort of like test that out first on the network without
Yeah.
with the
Yeah,
ability
we're aware
to
of that.
kind of roll it back. Okay, just wanted to make sure that everyone was clear that was an option.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I think
so I'm not sure that we go on. Carry on, but Dodger.
I think that you know, the zip editors can make recommendations. The community can say we want all of these things in the Zcash protocol, and you know, at ZF we are, you know, committed to implementing the will of the community. Within reason. If they want a backdoor, they can go and do it themselves. But so you can have all of the recommendations from the zip editors, you can have all the polls you want, but at the end of the day, there are only so many hours in the day, and we only have so many engineers. And if it becomes a situation where it isn't possible to jam everything in safely, then something may have to give, and that is why I referenced potentially just including the transaction format change and the prioritization. But this is all hypothetical at the moment. And given how much, how far past the end of the meeting scheduled time we are, I would suggest that now's not the time to rabbit hole on it. Strata.
Yeah. On that point, that was also something that we did talk about at length for the zip editor's viability assessment, and figuring out what things would be viable to include versus back out versus, and there are options there in terms of, you know, there are points at which we need to have something fixed before, you know, after which we need to be able to like deploy the software. The obvious one is the setting of mainnet activation height and the release of consensus node software that sets that. The more likely deadline for anything is the testnet activation height being set, because that's the point at which people are actually first running the software, and in particular, once we've set that height, if any consensus change is made, the consensus branch ID must change per zip 200. So really, the absolute drop dead date for anything, absolute drop dead point for anything to be backed out or included or whatever, modulo security fixes, is really the point at which we set the test and activation height. In terms of just how people should be thinking about it.
Thank you.
I've completely forgotten what the other point was, so I'll just leave it there.
Jason.
Yeah, Dodger, one request with regard to the poll. Before you open it up in Helios, are you able to post an initial draft to the forum for the community
of course,
to provide
yes.
feedback? Awesome. Thank you.
So one last point I want to make, that when we do polls, they should be focused on the things that are actually still in dispute. So to me, the inclusion of 235 is separately in dispute, and therefore there should be a poll question specifically on that. And if you, it sounds like Dodger thinks that the Sprout change is, sorry, the disallowing V4 transactions is also in dispute, and therefore there should be a poll question specifically on that. And the question should not be just include the zip. It should be about the main effect of the zip. So do you want to require that 60% of fees are bent? And define what that means. do you want to disallow V4 transactions, which will have the effect of not being able to spend Sprout funds?
Feel free to start up a Google Doc and put your suggestions in there and or post them to the forum.
I have very little time before I'm going on holiday, but I will if I can.
Is this going to be part of the ZCG poll, or is it going to, do we have time to like work these details out?
I think we should try to get it into the ZCG poll.
What's the timeline for the ZCG poll?
Mid next week, so basically approximately a week from now.
Okay. I mean, I can make some suggestions before that. That's okay.
We can always
yeah, I mean,
we can always push it to next year.
Yeah, and so Strad, you know what my opinions are on this, so yeah, I trust you to channel me on it.
Yep. And also it helps that like there are things that I think are obvious enough that they don't need to go in there. Like, do they want ZSAs? I think at this point we know.
Yeah.
Agreed.
You know, but I just, but playing devil's advocate, I would say that in terms of establishing a precedent for future process, maybe we shouldn't, like, who gets to assume that something is non-controversial? Because I don't want to have to be the person who everybody's shouting at if I make an assumption and then people disagree with it. And there will always be someone who disagrees. We know that from experience. Whatever we do, someone will try to pick a hole in it. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that disallowing V4 was controversial. So it seems that's not the case.
Just to some extent, I think the biggest benefit of the current controversy around that is making people aware that they might still have Sprout funds and they should start moving them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the controversy around disallowing V4 is not whether it should happen, but when it should happen.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where like we have been talking about it for years. We have
literally
definitely
literally since 2018.
And we have been talking about the kinds of things that have been proposed since before Zcash launched. So
whatever happened to Sprout on Halo?
There was never an implementation of that. And so I didn't think we should do it because I thought we should just do disallow Sprout instead. I thought it was basically a waste of time.
If it was something that someone felt strongly about doing, that would actually be easier than sapling on Halo. Because sapling is based on
let's not go into the reasons.
Won't get into the rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's a lot of work is the answer.
Yeah.
I would maybe what we need to do is we need to have a Arborist Call after party on Discord going forward. So with a nominated Discord, and so that people can join and continue an informal chat. But for now, let's wrap it up and have a good holiday season, everybody.
Could I very briefly grab an open announcement before we go? For anyone who just happens to be left. So if I can very briefly share screen, it's this one here. 4 years ago, I hacked together a example CLI for Zcash Client SQLite as purely a way of testing things. Zcash Client SQLite being the crate that backs the mobile SDK, Zashi, and a bunch of other things. And it lived as an example here for quite a while, and then we decided actually we were getting a lot of utility out of just like using it, and so we pulled it into a separate crate. But because I had just hacked this together, I was not at all comfortable with it being public because of like the way key material and things were handled. We finally had time a couple of weeks ago to 4 years later, but finally time to address my concerns, and so this is now public. And so if you want to play with it, it is Electrical Company Zcash SQLite CLI. It is a full CLI wallet. But it is imperative. So it is literally just you run a command, it does an action on the wallet, and then it shuts down. There is no persistent process. It is just for poking at essentially a version of what backs the Zashi Edge Unstoppable.
Cool.
I think a few people on this call have already been given like private access over the time to be able to like use it for this way. But I'm now comfortable with anyone playing around with it, whereas I wasn't a while ago. The main thing now is that actually when you load the seed phrase in, it gets it's encrypted on disk to an AGE key, which actually means that you can, in theory, I haven't had a chance to test this, but you should be able to use this with the AGE plugin YubiKey crate, which I maintain, to have your seed phrase encrypted and controlled by a YubiKey.
How much money would you personally be comfortable trusting to this wallet?
Oh, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? Well, maybe $1 million. If you're storing it with the YubiKey backend, then I would personally be comfortable with 5-figure USD. I would not currently go to 6. Does that give you a sense of that?
Yes.
Mostly because
it clearly depends on how secure you keep your computer and
exactly that's mostly where it sits now. I would have not felt I would have been an order of magnitude lower than that a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, so I'll drop that in if I can figure out how to get back to the. I can't figure out how to get back to the. Here we go. Yeah, there's the URL. So if people want to play with it, they can play with it now. I'm no longer at the point where I needed to keep delete the make file. Cool.
Okay, well, I'm leaving the call because I have dinner to cook. But if other people want to stick around and continue talking, feel free. But I'll say Merry Christmas to everybody. Bye-bye.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays. Bye.
Yeah.